Because when a person is truly secure, they don't need to target what shines. Only insecurity feels threatened by contrast. Only instability feels provoked by calm. Only inner lack reacts aggressively to quiet strength. That's why the reactions seem excessive. That's why situations escalate quickly around you while you're simply standing still. You're not the cause of the chaos. You're the mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. At first, the opposition assumed you were unaware, that you'd react impulsively. That you'd defend yourself loudly, argue endlessly, prove your worth. That's how most stories go. That's how most people respond when pressure mounts. But you didn't. You stayed measured, observant, grounded. Not passive, but intentional. Not silent out of fear, but restrained out of clarity. And that restraint confused them more than confrontation ever could. Because when someone refuses to be provoked, the real motives of others are exposed. This is where the narrative shifts. What began as subtle resistance turned into focused attention. What felt like random obstacles revealed a pattern. What looked like coincidence started forming a shape you couldn't ignore anymore. Have you felt that tightening sensation lately, like the walls are closing in, but somehow you're not panicking? Like something is compressing, yet strengthening you at the same time. That's not collapse, that's concentration. Energy intensifies before it changes form. There are times when protection doesn't look like comfort. It looks like pressure that keeps you from shrinking. You're from shrinking. Like tension that forces you to stay aligned with who you truly are. Like circumstances that strip away distractions until only what's essential remains. And what remains in you is not fragile. You've already survived moments that should have altered you permanently. Losses that could have hardened you. Betrayals that could have turned you cynical. Delays that could have extinguished your hope. But they didn't. Instead, something steadier emerged, quieter, stronger, less reactive, a presence that doesn't need validation, a confidence that doesn't announce itself, a calm that unsettles those who rely on noise to feel powerful. This is why the opposition feels disorganized now, why reactions feel desperate, why efforts to undermine you seem to backfire. They were prepared for resistance. They weren't prepared for integrity, and here's the part few understand. When integrity is observed consistently, intervention shifts from observation to involvement, not because you demanded it, not because you proved anything, but because some qualities cannot be manufactured, and when they're found, they're preserved. You may not see it yet, but certain doors you thought were permanently closed are quietly loosening. Conversations are happening without your presence. Decisions are being reconsidered behind scenes you'll never enter, not because of influence, but because truth has a way of rearranging things once it's been acknowledged. The very group that watched you with suspicion has unknowingly accelerated a transition they tried to prevent. And the irony. They revealed your strength by attempting to test it. Take a moment and ask yourself, honestly, when was the last time you felt the urge to defend yourself and chose peace instead? When was the last time you could have retaliated and didn't? When was the last time silence felt more powerful than explanation? Those moments mattered more than you realize because they marked a turning point. What comes next won't arrive with noise or announcement. It will arrive subtly through shifts in access, clarity, and direction. Through a sense of inner permission you didn't have before. Through a quiet assurance that you no longer need to prove what is already evident. The pressure you felt was not meant to crush you. It was meant to clarify you. And as this first layer of the story closes, understand this. The resistance didn't fail because it wasn't strong enough. It failed because it misjudged who you were becoming. There is more unfolding, more being revealed, more turning in your favor, not suddenly, but decisively. Stay present, stay steady, and stay open to what's about to shift. Because the next phase won't ask whether you're ready, it will simply arrive. There's something important you need to understand before we go any further, and it's something most people never realize while they're inside the moment. When pressure surrounds you and resistance increases, the natural assumption is that something is going wrong, that you took a wrong step, that you missed a sign, that you somehow invited conflict by accident. But what if the true? What if the intensity you're feeling is not a warning, but confirmation? Because there is a stage in every spiritual journey where concealment ends, not publicly, but energetically. You don't announce it. You don't change your appearance. You don't even speak differently. Yet something about your presence becomes undeniable. People feel it before they understand it, and those who benefit from confusion sense the clarity forming before it's fully visible. That's when targeting begins, not dramatic at first. It starts as subtle misinterpretation, passive resistance. Conversations that shift tone when you enter the room. Opportunities that suddenly stall without explanation. You're not attacked directly, you're tested indirectly. Have you noticed how the resistance around you often comes from people who once felt comfortable near you? People who didn't mind your kindness until it reflected something they hadn't dealt with in themselves. That's not random. Familiar resistance is the most revealing kind, because strangers don't feel threatened by what they don't recognize. Only those close enough to sense the change respond emotionally to it, and their response tells you everything you need to know about the shift that has already occurred within you. Here's the deeper layer. Not all opposition is rooted in malice. Some of it comes from fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of comparison. Fear of losing control over a narrative they once dominated. When someone builds their identity on being the strongest presence in the room, even quiet strength feels disruptive, and your strength is quiet. It doesn't shout, it doesn't posture, it doesn't need agreement to exist. That's what makes it unsettling, because it doesn't ask permission to be real. There was a moment. You might remember it clearly, or it might blur into the background now, when you realized you could no longer shrink yourself to maintain harmony. When being agreeable started to feel like self-betrayal, when silence felt heavy, not peaceful, that moment mattered, because from that point on, the dynamic changed. You stopped bending to fit rooms that couldn't hold you. You stopped over-explaining to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped chasing alignment where resistance had already revealed itself. And that's when the pressure intensified. Have you ever wondered why? The moment you stopped trying to be liked, things became more complicated, yet strangely clearer at the same time. That's the paradox of inner authority. It simplifies your inner world while disrupting unstable structures around you. What those opposing you don't realize is that their focus has already shifted the balance. Attention has power, observation has consequence, and when resistance fixates on something it doesn't understand, it often accelerates what it's trying to stop. There's a reason storms gather around mountains before plains. Elevation changes weather patterns, and whether you see yourself that way or not, you're no longer operating at ground level. Your perspective has widened, your reactions have slowed. Your decisions carry more weight because they're no longer reactive. They're rooted. That rooting didn't happen overnight. It was forged quietly through disappointment, endurance, and unanswered questions, through moments when you did the right thing and still lost. Through times when your integrity cost you comfort, through seasons where you stood alone without certainty, yet refused to abandon your core. Those moments built something in you that cannot be replicated artificially. And now it's visible, not to everyone, but to the right ones. That's why the resistance feels coordinated. Why patterns repeat. Why the same energy shows up in different forms. It's not because you're being hunted, it's because clarity attracts attention from those who thrive in ambiguity. But here's the twist most people miss. Attention doesn't always mean power over you. Sometimes it means power is being handed back to you. Because the more they react, the more they reveal. The more they attempt to control the narrative, the clearer your position becomes. The more they try to provoke you, the more your composure stands out. Silence, when chosen consciously, becomes a language louder than argument. And you've been speaking it fluently. Think about how many times recently you've been tempted to explain yourself and didn't. How many times you let actions speak instead of defending your character? How many times you allowed truth to surface on its own timeline instead of forcing recognition? Those weren't missed opportunities. They were strategic pauses. There is a reason ancient wisdom emphasizes restraint over reaction, not because reaction is wrong, but because restraint exposes truth faster. It allows unstable systems to collapse under their own weight without your involvement, and collapse is already underway. You may not see it yet, but cracks are forming where confidence once appeared solid. Alliances built on shared insecurity are straining. Stories held together by assumption are unraveling, because when someone stands firm without hostility, it destabilizes narratives built on opposition. Your calm is not passive, it's catalytic. Have you felt that strange sense of anticipation lately? Like something is about to surface, but you don't know what? Like the atmosphere is charged, yet quiet. That's the space before revelation. It's the moment when truth no longer needs defense. When alignment begins asserting itself naturally. When doors start opening not because you knocked harder, but because resistance lost its leverage. And here's what's important. This phase requires patience, not effort, observation, not intervention, trust, not control. Because what's unfolding now is bigger than any single interaction. It's a recalibration of influence, a redistribution of authority, a quiet acknowledgement that something real cannot be sidelined forever. Those who targeted you assumed you'd break, lash out, or retreat. They miscalculated. You didn't collapse. You clarified. You didn't retaliate. You refined. You didn't disappear. You anchored. And anchoring changes everything. As we move into the next part of this journey, understand this clearly. You're no longer being tested to see if you belong. You're being observed to see how you'll lead. Not through dominance, but through consistency. What comes next will not feel like a battle. It will feel like release, like tension finally resolving, like energy that was tied up in resistance suddenly flowing elsewhere. Stay present. Stay grounded. And trust what's already unfolding beneath the surface. Because the shift has already begun, and it's working in your favor, even now. Before anything visibly changes around you, something subtle has already shifted within you, and that internal shift is what's rearranging everything else. There is a phase most people never recognize while they're in it. It's not dramatic. There are no fireworks, no announcement, no applause. You no longer feel compelled to fix misunderstandings that aren't yours to resolve. You let truth stand on its own. That's growth, and growth changes the rules of engagement. What once drained you now feels irrelevant. What once intimidated you now feels transparent. What once confused you now feels predictable. And predictability removes fear. Fear thrives in uncertainty, but clarity dissolves it. That's why the atmosphere around you feels different lately. Quieter, heavier in some spaces, lighter in others. You're moving between environments with different frequencies, and your nervous system is learning which ones resonate with your current state. Not every door that closes is a loss. Some are confirmations. Because what's opening next doesn't require you to shrink, explain, or perform. It requires you to remain exactly as you are. Steady, observant, grounded. And this is important. Do not rush this phase. It's tempting to want visible results, to want acknowledgement, to want resolution. But what's happening now is foundational. It's the clearing of interference. The recalibration of alignment, the quiet reorganization of influence. What's being removed cannot follow you where you're going, and what's being drawn toward you will recognize you without persuasion. Have you noticed how certain opportunities feel closer now? Not in urgency, but in inevitability, or like they're approaching at their own pace, unaffected by resistance. That's because what's meant for you doesn't require struggle to arrive. It responds to readiness, not effort. You are ready in ways you weren't before. Not because you learned more, but because you released more. Old expectation. Expectation. Immense of old attachments, old versions of yourself that survived by accommodating chaos. Now you don't accommodate chaos. You observe it, understand it, and move past it. And as you do, something remarkable happens. The noise fades. The pressure lifts. The sense of being watched turns into the awareness of being guided. Not controlled. Not forced, guided. There's a difference between being pushed and being supported. What's unfolding now is support. Subtle, precise, timely. The right information arriving when you need it. The right people crossing paths with you effortlessly. The right decisions becoming obvious without debate. That's not coincidence, that's coherence. And coherence attracts momentum. As we move forward, understand this clearly. What targeted you could not stop you. What questioned you clarified you. What resisted you revealed itself, and what remains around you now, the quieter spaces, the calmer connections, the slower but steadier progress. That's the foundation for what comes next. You don't need to rush toward it. It's already moving toward you. Stay present, stay discerning, and keep trusting the stillness, because it's doing more work than you realize. What's happening now isn't loud, but it is decisive. This is the stage where separation becomes undeniable. Not because you force distance, but because reality itself starts drawing lines that can't be crossed anymore. You're no longer standing at the center of every conflict, trying to hold everyone together. Instead, you're watching situations choose sides without your involvement. And that shift can feel unsettling at first, because for a long time you were the bridge, the mediator. The one who absorbed tension so others didn't have to. You carried emotional weight quietly, believing that endurance was love. But endurance without reciprocity slowly becomes erosion. Something in you finally recognized that. So now, when imbalance shows up, your system doesn't rush to fix it. You pause, you observe, you let things reveal their true nature, and what reveals itself often surprises you, not because it's new, but because you're seeing it without filters for the first time. Have you noticed how some people seem uncomfortable with your calm lately? Not angry, not openly hostile, just unsettled. That's because your calm no longer seeks validation. It doesn't adjust to match other people's chaos. It doesn't shrink to keep the peace. And when calm becomes non-negotiable, it exposes who relied on instability to feel relevant. This is where the narrative around you begins to shift. When you were accommodating, you were a kind. When you became discerning, you were suddenly a cold. When you stopped explaining, you were labeled arrogant. But labels are tools people use when they lose access. And the most revealing part? The ones who speak the loudest about you are rarely the ones who truly know you. They're reacting to what they can no longer influence. You see, influence changes when you stop reacting. There was a time when emotional pressure could pull you into unnecessary conversations, defensive explanations, or self-doubt spirals. That time has passed. Now, when pressure appears, it meets stillness instead of reaction, and stillness destabilizes manipulation. Because manipulation needs movement, it needs emotional engagement, it needs you to doubt yourself long enough to regain control. But when you remain grounded, the tactics collapse under their own weight. That's why certain attempts to provoke you feel almost obvious now. You see the pattern before it fully unfolds. You sense the intention beneath the words. You recognize when concern is actually control, when curiosity is actually comparison, when advice is actually projection. And instead of confronting it, you disengage. Not out of fear, out of clarity. This is a level of maturity most people never reach, not because it's inaccessible, but because it requires letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. And that is one of the hardest attachments to release. But once you do, something powerful happens. Your energy becomes selective. Just selective, not closed, not guarded. Selective. You start noticing how different environments feel in your body. Some spaces energize you without effort, others drain you within minutes. You no longer override these signals with logic or obligation. You trust them. That trust is reshaping your path in quiet but permanent ways. You're also beginning to see how certain conflicts were never about you at all. They were about what you represented: stability, integrity, consistency, the things others struggled to maintain internally. So when they couldn't reconcile that difference within themselves, they externalized it onto you. That realization doesn't make you bitter, it makes you free. Free from the need to defend your character, free from the impulse to correct every misunderstanding. Free from carrying responsibility for emotions that were never yours to manage, and freedom changes posture. You walk differently now, even if no one can articulate how. You listen differently. You respond differently. You respond differently. You leave conversations sooner. You choose rest without guilt. You protect your inner world with intention. That protection isn't selfish, it's stewardship, because what's being cultivated inside you right now requires space, not noise. It requires patience, not pressure. It requires alignment, not approval. And here's where the deeper shift begins. As external distractions fall away, your inner voice becomes clearer. Not louder, clearer. You begin recognizing what is truly meant for you versus what merely wanted your attention. Opportunities that once seemed appealing now feel misaligned. Paths that once scared you now feel strangely familiar. Almost like remembering something you forgot. That's because this stage isn't about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who you were before survival shaped your decisions. Before adaptation blurred your instincts. Before you learned to compromise your needs to maintain proximity. You're remembering yourself, and remembrance carries authority. People sense it when they're around you. They may not understand it, but they feel it. That's why some are drawn closer with genuine respect, while others instinctively step back. Your presence now requires authenticity in return. No masks, no games, no emotional shortcuts. And not everyone is prepared for that level of honesty. So if things feel quieter right now, trust it. Quiet is not emptiness. It's preparation, it's recalibration. It's the space where clarity forms without interference. This is not the part of the story where everything resolves. This is the part where everything aligns. What comes next will not require you to chase it. It will recognize you. It will recognize you. It will meet you where you are, not where you used to be. And it will fit without forcing. Until then, remain steady. Let truth speak for itself. Let distance do its work. Let stillness finish what struggle never could. Because the foundation being built now is strong enough to support what's coming next. And that's something you won't need to fight to keep. What unfolds next doesn't arrive as noise or spectacle. It arrives as recognition. There comes a moment when life stops testing whether you will abandon yourself, because you already proved that you won't. And when that moment passes, the nature of your experiences begins to change. The challenges don't disappear, but they lose their power to confuse you. You're no longer asking, why is this happening to me? You're asking, what is this revealing? That shift alone alters everything, because when awareness replaces confusion, fear loses its grip. Situations that once felt overwhelming now feel instructive. Even delays begin to make sense. You realize some things weren't withheld to punish you. They were postponed to protect what was being formed within you. Have you felt that strange calm lately, even when circumstances haven't fully resolved? That's not denial. That's discernment settling in. You're beginning to notice that timing matters more than speed. That arriving whole is better than arriving early. That some doors closing saved you from environments that would have slowly dismantled who you're becoming. And what's remarkable is how this understanding doesn't harden you. It softens you in the right places. Your compassion becomes quieter but deeper. Your generosity becomes intentional instead of automatic. Your presence becomes grounding instead of reactive. You're no longer leaking energy into spaces that don't honor it. This is where your inner authority becomes visible. Not through dominance, not through control, but through steadiness. People can feel when someone no longer negotiates their worth. Conversations change around you. Expectations adjust. Even those who once overlooked you now measure their words more carefully, because something in you is settled, and settled energy commands respect without demanding it. This is also the phase where opportunities begin appearing that don't require you to betray your values. They feel clean, clear, surprisingly aligned. There's less inner resistance, less second-guessing. You don't feel the need to convince yourself they're right. You just know. And when doubt does try to creep in, it doesn't stay long. It can't survive in a mind that trusts itself again. That trust was earned. It was earned through nights you stayed honest when shortcuts were available, through moments you chose restraint instead of retaliation, through seasons where growth happened privately while recognition lagged behind. Those seasons mattered more than you realized. Because now, when visibility begins increasing, and it will, you won't be destabilized by it. You won't become addicted to approval or threatened by critique. You've already learned how to stand without leaning. That's rare, and rarity attracts attention. Some attention will be sincere, supportive, life-giving. You'll feel it immediately. No anxiety, no pressure, no need to perform. Just mutual respect and ease. Other attention will feel curious, watchful, calculated. That's where your discernment matters. Not everyone who approaches you now does so with clean motives. Some are drawn by admiration, others by comparison, a few by the hope of extracting something they can't cultivate themselves. You won't need to confront any of this directly. Your boundaries will do the speaking. You'll notice how your "no" lands more firmly now, without explanation, how your silence communicates more than your words ever did, how stepping back creates clarity instead of guilt. This is the stage where restraint becomes power. And power used wisely doesn't announce itself. You may also notice memories resurfacing during this time, not randomly, but purposefully. Past moments where you ignored your intuition, where you compromised your instincts to maintain peace, where you doubted yourself longer than necessary. These memories aren't coming to shame you, they're coming to be integrated, so you can finally release the version of yourself that survived without support, and step fully into the version that chooses alignment without apology. This integration is subtle but profound. You'll feel it in how quickly you recover from disappointment, in how little you personalize other people's projections, in how naturally you choose environments that nourish rather than drain you. You're not becoming detached, you're becoming precise, and precision is a form of care. As this precision sharpens, you'll sense that something ahead is approaching, not rushing toward you, but steadily moving into place. It may be a role, a connection, a calling, or a responsibility that requires exactly the level of maturity you've cultivated. Had it arrived earlier, it would have overwhelmed you. Now, it will meet you evenly. This is why the pressure intensified before things became clearer. Why opposition surfaced just before peace stabilized. Why misunderstandings peaked before understanding deepened. The resistance wasn't random. It was confirmation that something valuable was forming. So if you're standing in a quieter season right now, honor it. Don't rush it. Don't fill it with noise out of habit. This stillness is not a pause. It's positioning, and what follows positioning is movement that doesn't need to be forced. In the next phase, you won't need to prove who you are. Your consistency already has. And now, everything begins to narrow, not in a restrictive way, but in a clarifying one. What once felt scattered starts to organize itself. What once demanded effort begins to flow with less resistance. You realize you're no longer chasing meaning. Meaning is meeting you where you stand. This is the phase where your life becomes quieter on the outside and stronger on the inside. You don't feel the need to announce plans. You don't explain your vision to people who can't see past the surface. You move deliberately, guided by an inner signal that doesn't need validation. Have you noticed how your intuition speaks more clearly now? Not louder, clearer. It doesn't shout, it nudges, and you trust it. This trust changes how you walk into rooms. You're not scanning for approval. You're observing, reading the atmosphere, sensing where you belong and where you don't need to linger. And because you're no longer desperate to be understood, understanding finds you. The right conversations start happening at the right time. The right people reveal themselves, sometimes unexpectedly, sometimes after long silence. And what's striking is how natural these connections feel. No performance, no pressure, no pretending, just resonance. This is also when you begin to see the full picture of why certain groups turned against you, why envy surfaced where you least expected it, why people projected motives onto you that never existed. It wasn't about what you did, it was about what you represented. Your presence quietly challenged systems built on insecurity. Your steadiness unsettled those who survive on chaos. Your integrity reflected what others had abandoned in themselves. And instead of breaking you, that targeting refined you. You didn't absorb their bitterness. You didn't internalize their narratives. You stayed anchored, even when it would have been easier to harden. That choice mattered. That choice mattered. Because now, when others lose themselves trying to compete, you remain grounded. When others react impulsively, you respond intentionally. When others scramble for control, you stay centered. This is the kind of authority that doesn't dominate, it stabilizes. And stability is rare in a world addicted to noise. You may find that some people drift away during this stage, not dramatically, not explosively, just naturally. Conversations fade, access reduces, familiar dynamics no longer fit. Let them go without resentment. Some people were meant to walk with you through survival, not expansion. You're not abandoning anyone, you're honoring the season that's changing. And as this clearing happens, space opens for something new to enter. It may arrive quietly, an idea that won't leave you alone. A responsibility that feels heavy but right. A path that asks for commitment rather than excitement. This isn't about thrill, it's about legacy. You're stepping into a role that requires discernment, patience, and emotional regulation. One that demands you stay true even when misunderstood, and then misunderstood. One that rewards consistency over charisma. And the reason you can carry it now is simple. You've already proven you won't abandon yourself when it gets uncomfortable. That's why pressure no longer scares you. That's why opposition no longer defines you. That's why comparison no longer distracts you. You're rooted. And rooted people don't panic when the wind shifts. They bend, but they don't break. So if you're sensing that something significant is approaching, trust that feeling. Not with anxiety, but with readiness. You're not being rushed, you're being prepared. Nothing that's coming will require you to betray your values. Nothing ahead demands you shrink. Nothing unfolding asks you to become someone you're not. It asks you to stand fully as who you already are. And before we close, take a moment, just a quiet breath, and let this settle. You've survived what tried to distort you. You've outgrown what tried to define you. You've remained intact where others fractured. That matters. Let's end with a short prayer. May clarity guard your decisions. May peace steady your steps. May wisdom rise louder than fear. And may what's meant for you arrive without force, confusion, or delay. If this word confirms something you've already been sensing deep within, comedy, receive it below.